right, we are going to begin our journey backwards. We've made it from fraction to decimal to percent, and now we're going to go from percent to decimal and then back to fraction. We're going to go back to where we started, okay? So in order to go from a percentage to a decimal, you'll notice that it's actually quite the opposite of moving from decimal to percent. So instead of multiplying the decimal by 100, we're going to divide the decimal by 100. Excuse me, not the decimal. Oh my goodness. I meant to say divide the percentage by 100. Let's take a look at a few examples. Okay, before the examples, I want to add one more thing. When you divide the percentage by 100, you'll see a pattern where the decimal is actually moving. So we end up moving the decimal 2 places, not to the right, but to the left in this case. So when we divide the percentage by 100, we're actually moving the decimal 2 places to the left. Now let's take a look at some examples. All right, so here is my percentage, 30%. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write the number and place the decimal right after it. Okay, now when we divide this, when we divide 30 by 100, what's happening, or what's going to happen, is this decimal is going to go not one, but 2 places to the left. So the decimal is now going to be in front of the 3. So our decimal looks like this. 0.3, or 3/10. Let's take a look at another example. All right, let's say my percentage is 9%. So I'm just going to write the number by itself, and the decimal goes right after it. And when I divide this number by 100, what's happening? This decimal is going to go not 1, but 2 places to the left. And so we must add a 0 before the 9 as a placeholder. So our final answer, 9% written as a decimal, is 0.09, or 9/100. All right, example number 3, 82.5%. So I'm just going to rewrite the number without the percent sign, 82.5, and I'm going to divide this percentage by 100, right, because we're trying to change the percent back into a decimal. So what happens is this decimal point moves not 1, but 2 places to the left. And so now the decimal is in front of the 8. So our final answer, 0.825. Let's do one more example. Let's say our percentage is over 100. Okay, the process does not change, folks. We're going to write the number and then place the decimal right after it. Now we divide by 100, which is the same thing as this decimal point moving not 1, but 2 places to the left in between the 1 and the 5. So our decimal is 1.5, or 1 5/10. And there you have it. That's how you change a percent into a decimal. Okay, and our journey is coming to an end here, the final leg, the final stretch, and we're almost home, folks. We need to convert decimals back into fractions. How do we do that? So this is kind of a 2-step process. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to identify the place value, okay? And when you do this, this place value is going to become the denominator of your fraction. Okay. Once you find the denominator, the original decimal that you have becomes your numerator, or the number on top. Then lastly, I know I said two-step, didn't I? I guess it's a three-step process. Lastly, you're going to simplify the fraction. Let's take a look at some examples. All right, I have my decimal 0.25. My first step is to identify the place value. And remember, the place value that we're looking for is the very last number in your decimal. So what place value is this? What place value is the 5 in? Well, remember, that's why we wrote it down at the beginning. So it goes tenths and hundredths. So I read this as, I'm going to write it on words. I read this as 25 hundredths. Now that we've identified the place value, that's going to become our denominator. So hundredths, so 100 is going to be our denominator. And then our original decimal, this 0.25, becomes the numerator. Okay, so far we have a fraction, but now we need to simplify it. We need to make it into simplest terms. So, what number goes into both 25 and 100? Well, I know that 25 goes into both of those. So if I divide the numerator and the denominator by 25, my fraction simplifies to 1/4. And that is my final answer. Let's do another one. Okay, here's my second example, 0.8. First thing, identify the place value. This 8 is in the tenths place. So that means the denominator of my fraction is going to be 10. Then remember, so that's my first step. Then my second step, the original decimal becomes the numerator. And there we have a fraction. Last step, we simplify. So a number that goes into 8 and 10, well, I know 2 goes into both of those. So my final fraction is 4/5. Another. Okay, here I have 1.15. The process doesn't change just because I have a number in front of the decimal. It stays the same. So let's go ahead and identify the place value of this decimal. So look at the last number. It looks like we're in the hundredths place. So our denominator is going to be 100. The decimal, this 0.15, becomes our numerator. And what do you think happens to this 1 here? I don't know if that color is going to work. What do you think happens to this 1 here? Well, if you're thinking of a mixed number, you would be correct. This decimal translates into a mixed number. So we have 1 and 15 hundredths. However, you can't forget to do our last step, the division process, or the simplification process. Let's try to simplify 15 over 100. I know that 5 goes into both of those numbers. 15 divided by 5 is 3, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. Can I simplify any more? Is there a number that goes into 3 and 20 besides 1? Nope, I think we're done. And then don't forget about the whole number. And this is our final answer. All right, let's take a look at this final example here, 0.61. Again, I'm going to identify the place value. So I'm looking at the last number in my decimal here, and that's going to be this 1. And the 1 is in the hundredths place. So our denominator is going to be 100. The decimal, right, the original decimal, 0.61, that becomes our numerator. So 61 over 100. Okay, now last step, check to see if you can simplify. Is there a number that goes into 61 and 100 other than 1? It's not even. 61's not even. So 2 doesn't go in. 3 doesn't go into either of those. 4 doesn't go into 61. 5 doesn't go into 61. 6 doesn't go into 61. I think, folks, I think this is our final answer. And sometimes this will happen where you can't simplify any further. So this answer is A-okay. All right, we have finally made it back home. We have traveled from being a fraction, changed into a decimal, and then changed into a percentage. And we went back to being a decimal and then back to being a fraction. Alrighty, folks. I hope you've enjoyed comparing bits and pieces. I'll see you in our next unit.